The stranger appeared at exactly midnight, and Wren Grayson knew before she even looked up that something about him was different. She'd been working the graveyard shift at Crescent Moon Coffee for 3 months now, and the hours between 11 and dawn had taught her to recognize the usual types. Truckers, insomniacs, college students cramming for exams, cops grabbing a caffeine fix between calls. But this man, if man was even the right word, stepped through the door with a presence that made the fluorescent lights seem to flicker, made the air itself grow heavy and still. Wren's hands stilled on the espresso machine she'd been cleaning, her breath catching despite herself. He was tall, impossibly so, with a frame that spoke of both elegance and lethal strength. His hair fell in waves of pure white around a face that could have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a sharp jaw, lips that were almost too perfect to be real. But it was his skin that truly arrested her attention. Pale as moonlight, luminous in a way that suggested something ancient and otherworldly. He wore a long black coat that belonged to another century, and his eyes, silver and penetrating, found hers across the empty cafe with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. We're open," she managed, cursing the tremor in her voice. "What can I get you?" He moved toward the counter with footsteps that made no sound, and Wren noticed that the overhead lights really were dimming slightly in his wake, as if his presence consumed the brightness around him. When he stopped before her, she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze, and found herself drowning in eyes that held centuries of knowledge she couldn't begin to comprehend. "You are alone tonight." His voice was like dark velvet, accented with something European and indefinably old. Not a question, a statement. "My coworker called in sick," Wren heard herself say, gripping the counter for stability. "But I can still make you anything you'd like." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his perfect features. "Can you?" The way he said it made heat climb her neck. "I make a mean cappuccino. I require something more specific." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that should have been frightening but instead sent an entirely different kind of shiver down her spine. "Do you have pomegranate juice?" "Yes. We keep it for the health nut crowd." "Espresso? Obviously activated charcoal?" Wren blinked. "Actually, yes. Some people put it in lattice, Instagram thing, cinnamon, cayenne pepper, and..." He paused as if considering. "Do you have edible silver leaf?" "That's a weirdly specific." She stopped. "Wait. Actually, yes. The owner's daughter was on a fancy coffee kick a few months ago. There's still some in the back." His eyes gleamed with what looked like satisfaction. "Excellent. Then you will make me this drink. A double shot of espresso, 4 ounces of pomegranate juice heated to exactly 140 degrees, a quarter teaspoon of activated charcoal, a pinch of cinnamon, the smallest touch of cayenne, and a single flake of silver leaf on top. Can you do this?" It was the strangest drink order Wren had heard in 3 years of barista work, but she found herself nodding. "Sure, give me a few minutes." She moved through the cafe's back area in a daze, gathering ingredients that no sane person would combine. The pomegranate juice steamed in its pitcher, the espresso machine hissed and gurgled, and she carefully measured each bizarre component while acutely aware of his silver gaze following her every movement. When she finally placed the finished concoction before him, dark red liquid swirled with black, dusted with spices and crowned with a shimmer of silver, she half expected him to laugh at the absurdity. Instead, he lifted the cup with fingers that were long and elegant and impossibly pale and took a slow sip. His eyes closed briefly, and an expression of something like relief crossed his features. "Perfect," he murmured. "You have a gift, Miss Grayson." "Wren Grayson." She swallowed. "And it's just coffee." "Well, not coffee, but you know what I mean. Do not diminish your skill." He opened his eyes, and the intensity in them made her breath catch again. "This is precisely what I needed. What do I owe you?" $8.50. He produced a bill from inside his coat, 100, and placed it on the counter. "Keep the change. I will return tomorrow. Same time, same drink." "That's a $90 tip for a weird juice espresso thing. Is it acceptable?" Wren thought of her student loans, her ancient car that needed new brakes, the rent that was always just slightly too high. "It's very acceptable." "Then I will see you tomorrow night, Wren Grayson." The way he said her name made it sound like a secret, intimate and weighted with meaning. "My name is Alaric, remember it." He left as silently as he'd arrived, and Wren stood in the empty cafe with a $100 bill in her hand, and the feeling that her life had just tilted irrevocably off its axis. He returned the next night at exactly midnight, and the night after that, and the night after that. Always alone, always dressed in clothes that belonged to another era, always requesting the same bizarre combination of ingredients that Wren had started preparing 5 minutes before his arrival. They never spoke beyond pleasantries, but she felt his gaze on her like a physical touch every moment he remained in the cafe. watching her work with an attention that should have been unnerving, but instead made her hyper-aware of every movement she made. On the 7th night, she finally asked, "What's in this drink that makes you come back every night?" Alaric had been raising the cup to his lips but paused. "Curiosity? You tip me $100 for a drink that costs less than $9. Nobody does that without a reason. Perhaps I simply appreciate quality service. Or perhaps," Wren said, surprising herself with her boldness, "this is the weirdest drink I've ever made, and I'm curious why someone would need these exact ingredients combined exactly this way every single night." He studied her in silence, and she wondered if she'd overstepped. Then slowly he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from beautiful to absolutely devastating. "You are observant and brave to question me. Should I not be brave? Most people sense what I am and wisely keep their distance." Wren's heart stuttered. "What you are? You haven't guessed?" He took a sip of his drink, watching her over the rim. "Even after 7 nights of seeing me arrive as the clock strikes midnight, never aging, never appearing in the reflection of your coffee machine's chrome surfaces?" She'd noticed the reflection thing, actually. Had told herself it was a trick of the lighting. But now, with him watching her with those ageless silver eyes, reality clicked into place with a certainty that should have sent her running but instead rooted her to the spot. "You're a vampire, yes. And this drink helps me tolerate being awake during hours when my kind typically rest." He set the cup down carefully. "The pomegranate juice has properties that sustain us. The espresso provides stimulation our bodies no longer naturally produce. The charcoal binds certain toxins that accumulate in our blood during daylight hours even if we're not exposed to sun. The spices," he gestured vaguely, "help with the taste, and the silver is a reminder." "Of what?" "That even poison can be beautiful in small doses. That weakness and strength are often indistinguishable. That I am not human, no matter how much I might wish otherwise in moments like these." Wren absorbed this, her scientific mind warring with the impossibility before her. "Why do you need to be awake at these hours? You said vampires typically rest." "I am not a typical vampire." His voice held an edge now, something dark and weighted with responsibility. "I am king of my kind in this region, and kingship does not allow for convenient schedules or peaceful rest." "You're a king," Wren repeated slowly. "Like an actual king? For the past 300 years, yes." She should have laughed, should have called someone, should have done anything except what she did, which was lean forward on the counter and study this impossible creature with fascination rather than fear. "That sounds exhausting." Something in his expression softened. "You have no idea. Actually," Wren said, thinking of her double shifts, her online classes she took during the day because she needed the degree to get out of service work, the way she sometimes went 30 hours without real sleep. "I might." Alaric looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something other than regal composure in his face. She saw exhaustion that matched her own, a bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much for too long. "You work too hard," he said quietly. "Says the Vampire King working through his rest hours, Suchet." He finished his drink and stood. "I should go." "But Wren Grayson?" "Yes, thank you, not just for the drink, for..." He seemed to search for words, "for not screaming, for treating me as simply another customer. It has been some time since anyone has done that." After he left, Wren stood in the silent cafe and realized she was in serious trouble, because she hadn't just made a drink for a vampire, she'd enjoyed his company, had looked forward to seeing him. And judging by the way her heart raced and her skin felt too warm, she was developing feelings that were extremely inadvisable for an exhausted barista, with no business getting tangled up with immortal royalty. The 8th night, Alaric brought danger with him. Wren sensed it the moment the cafe door opened at midnight, not because of Alaric himself, but because of the 3 figures that appeared in the window immediately after he entered. They were pale like him, beautiful like him, but where Alaric radiated controlled power, these 3 vampires looked hungry, feral. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness, and she saw Alaric's entire body go rigid as he registered their presence. "Stay behind the counter," he said, his voice dropping to a tone of absolute command. "Do not move. Do not speak." "What's happening?" "Wren, please." He turned to face her, and the concern in his eyes made her breath catch. "Trust me, stay there." The door opened, and the 3 vampires entered like wolves stalking prey. The woman leading them had white hair twisted in elaborate braids, skin so pale it almost glowed, and a smile that showed too many teeth. "Alaric," she purred. "How domestic of you, slumming with humans now." "Seraphine." Alaric's voice was ice. "You were banished from this territory. Your presence here breaks the accords." "The accords?" Seraphine laughed. "A sound like breaking glass. You and your ancient laws. Some of us think it's time for new leadership." Leadership that remembers what it means to be a predator. The two male vampires flanking her spread out, and Wren realized with cold clarity that they were surrounding Alaric. That this was an ambush, carefully planned and executed. "There are laws for a reason," Alaric said, and his voice carried centuries of authority. "We coexist with humans because the alternative is extinction, because hiding in shadows is preferable to being hunted to the last of our kind. You know this, Seraphine. I know that you've grown weak, that you come to this pathetic cafe every night like a tame dog begging for scraps." Seraphine's red eyes slid to Wren and her smile widened. "Tell me, King Alaric, what's so special about this one? Is she your pet, your blood donor, or simply a curiosity to break the monotony of immortality?" "She is under my protection," Alaric said, and power rolled off him in waves that made the cafe lights flicker wildly. "Harm her, and I will end you regardless of the consequences. Your protection." Seraphine tilted her head. "How romantic. But I think I'd like to test exactly how much this human means to you." She moved with inhuman speed, a blur of motion headed straight for the counter. Wren barely had time to flinch before Alaric was there, intercepting Seraphine mid-lunge with force that sent them both crashing into tables and chairs. The cafe erupted into chaos, wood splintering, glass shattering. Alaric and Seraphine locked in combat that moved too fast for Wren's eyes to fully track. The two male vampires lunged forward to join the fray, and Wren realized she couldn't just stand there. She grabbed the first thing her hand found, the pot of boiling water she'd been using to clean equipment, and hurled it at the nearest male vampire. It hit him square in the face and his scream was inhuman, agonized. "Holy water!" he shrieked. "She has holy water!" "It's not holy, it's just hot!" Wren shouted back, but Alaric used the distraction. He moved like lightning, like death itself, and suddenly he was holding Seraphine by the throat, lifting her off the ground with one hand while the other curled into claws that looked capable of tearing through steel. "Leave," he commanded, his voice resonating with power that made Wren's bones vibrate. "Leave now and I will consider your transgression a moment of poor judgment. Stay and I will show you exactly why I have been king for 3 centuries. For a heartbeat, Seraphine struggled. Then something in Alaric's eyes made her go very still, and Wren saw actual fear cross the vampire's beautiful face. "This isn't over," Seraphine hissed. "Yes," Alaric said softly, dangerously, "it is." He released her, and the 3 vampires fled with supernatural speed, gone so quickly that Wren might have imagined them if not for the destruction scattered across the cafe. Broken furniture, shattered mugs, claw marks gouged into the floor. Silence fell, broken only by Wren's rapid breathing. Alaric stood amid the chaos, his coat torn and his white hair disheveled but otherwise unharmed. When he turned to face her, his eyes were no longer silver but blazing gold, and she realized she was seeing him as he truly was, not the controlled, civilized king, but the predator beneath. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, strained. "No, are you? I heal." He crossed to the counter in 3 long strides, and before Wren could process what was happening, his hands framed her face, tilting it up so he could search her features with an intensity that stole her breath. "You threw boiling water at a vampire. He was going to attack you. He could have killed you. You were handling 3 at once. You thought to help me." Something in his expression cracked, revealing vulnerability beneath the ancient power. "You brave, foolish woman, you should have run." "I'm not really a runner," Wren whispered, acutely aware of his hands on her face, his body close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from his skin. "And you said I was under your protection. Seems like that should go both ways." Alaric made a sound low in his throat, and then his lips were on hers, crushing, desperate, full of 300 years of loneliness and a need that matched the ache she hadn't realized was building in her own chest. Wren kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his coat, pulling him closer despite the supernatural chill of his body. He tasted like the drink she made him every night, pomegranate and darkness and something indefinably other, and she never wanted to stop. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, though she suspected he didn't technically need to breathe, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. "This is dangerous," he murmured. "For both of us. I know. You should tell me to leave. Should forget you ever saw me, should I?" "Yes, but please don't." Wren laughed shakily. "I couldn't if I tried. You've ruined me for normal customers, Vampire King." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes, and she saw wonder in its face, as if she'd done something miraculous instead of simply choosing not to run. "Come with me," he said. "It's not safe for you here now. Seraphine knows about you, and she will use you to hurt me if given the chance." "Come with you where?" "My home, my court, where I can protect you properly." Wren thought of her tiny apartment, her ancient car, the cafe that would open in 6 hours with or without her. Thought of the sensible thing to do, which was clearly to refuse, to call the police or a priest, or someone who dealt with supernatural threats. Then she looked at Alaric, really looked at him, and saw 300 years of duty and loneliness and power wielded without anyone to share the burden. Saw the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and rare. Saw the possibility of something extraordinary if she was brave enough to reach for it. "Okay," she said, "but I need to make your drink first. You came here for a reason, and you're not leaving without it." The smile that crossed his face was brilliant, transforming. "As you wish." She made his drink with shaking hands while he watched, and when she passed it to him across the destroyed cafe, his fingers lingered on hers. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." Wren grabbed her jacket and phone, scrawled a note for her coworker about a family emergency that wasn't entirely untrue, and followed a vampire king out into the night. Alaric's home was not what she expected. Wren had imagined a gothic castle or maybe a creepy manor, but instead, he led her through the city's streets to a section of historic downtown she'd walked past 100 times without truly seeing. He stopped before what looked like an abandoned theater, its Art Deco facade faded and marked with a condemned sign that appeared official. "Glamour," he explained, seeing her confusion. "Humans see what we want them to see." He pressed his palm against the door, and it swung open silently, revealing not a dusty ruin but a space of breathtaking beauty. The interior soared upward for what seemed like impossible heights, supported by columns of black marble veined with silver. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of crystal, their light soft and warm despite the lack of visible bulbs. Rich carpets in deep burgundies and golds covered floors of polished stone, and everywhere Wren looked, she saw evidence of wealth and taste accumulated over centuries: paintings that belonged in museums, furniture that was art in itself, tapestries depicting scenes from eras she'd only read about in history books. "Holy shit," she breathed. "This is your place?" "The public face of it, yes, my court." Alaric guided her forward with a hand at the small of her back. "The living quarters are below, safer from sunlight. But I wanted you to see this first, to understand what." He cut off as a figure appeared from a side corridor, another vampire, male, with white hair cropped short and skin the color of fresh snow. He moved with warrior's grace and stopped short when he saw Wren, his silver eyes widening. "Alaric, you brought a human here?" "Wren, this is Severin, my captain of the guard and oldest friend." "Severin, this is Wren Grayson. She is under my protection, and she will be treated as an honored guest. Spread the word to all court members. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally." Severin's expression shifted from shock to something like concern. "Alaric, the council will object. There are laws about bringing humans into court spaces without proper clearance. I am aware of the laws. I wrote half of them." Alaric's voice carried absolute authority. "And I am invoking the king's right of sanctuary. She stays because of Seraphine's attack?" "You've heard already? The entire court has heard." 3 witnesses saw Seraphine and her accomplices fleeing the city borders. Severin's gaze flicked to Wren, assessing. "Is it true you threw boiling water at Victor?" "Yes?" A smile tugged at Severin's mouth. "He's telling everyone it was holy water blessed by the Pope. Too embarrassed to admit a human barista burned him with tap water." "It was actually filtered water from the cafe's purification system," Wren said. "But I don't want to ruin his story." Severin laughed outright at that, and some of the tension in Alaric's shoulders eased. "She has spirit at least. Very well, my king. I'll inform the household, but the council will want to meet her tomorrow night. That gives us time to rest." After Severin departed, Alaric led Wren deeper into the underground complex, down corridors lined with doors that she suspected led to rooms housing other vampires. They passed several along the way, all white-haired and pale-skinned, all beautiful in that otherworldly way, all stopping to stare at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Wren kept her spine straight and her chin up, refusing to be intimidated even as her pulse hammered against her ribs. Finally, Alaric stopped before an ornate door at the corridor's end. "These are my private chambers. You'll stay here with me, where I can ensure your safety. With you, the suite has multiple rooms. You'll have privacy." He opened the door, revealing a space that looked like it had been transplanted from a European palace: vaulted ceilings, more of those beautiful tapestries, furniture upholstered in rich fabrics, and a fireplace large enough to stand in. "But I need you close, Wren. Seraphine has allies in this city, possibly even within my court. I cannot protect you if you're housed elsewhere." The idea of sleeping in the same suite as a vampire king should have terrified her. Instead, Wren felt something warm and secure settle in her chest. "Okay, but I have conditions." Alaric raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating with me? I'm establishing boundaries. First, no drinking my blood without permission." "Agreed." "Second, I need a phone charger and internet access. I have online classes." "Done." "Third, I need to know what I'm walking into. You said there's a council? What does that mean for me being here? Alaric gestured toward a seating area arranged around the fireplace. When they were settled her on a couch that was sinfully comfortable, him in a chair positioned so he could watch both her and the door, he steepled his fingers and began to speak. Vampire society is ancient and complicated, but the basics are simple enough. Each region has a king or queen who maintains order, enforces our laws, and acts as intermediary between our kind and the human world. I rule over this territory, which encompasses the city and surrounding areas. Beneath me is a council of elder vampires who advise and, theoretically, check my power. Theoretically, the king's word is ultimately law, but it's politically wise to keep the council satisfied. They represent the various vampire bloodlines and factions. He paused. They will not be pleased that I've brought you here. Humans are not forbidden in our spaces, but it's unusual, particularly a human who has no formal ties to our world. What kind of formal ties? Blood donors who serve the court willingly, scholars who study our history and maintain our records. Occasionally, humans who are married to or partnered with vampires, though that's increasingly rare. Wren absorbed this. So what am I exactly? In their eyes, Alaric's gaze was intense. That depends on what you want to be. The weight of the question hung between them, laden with possibility and danger in equal measure. Wren thought about the kiss in the cafe, about the way her heart raced every time he looked at her, about the fact that she'd just abandoned her entire normal life to follow him into this supernatural world. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I'd like time to figure it out. Then you shall have it. Alaric rose smoothly. You should rest. It's nearly dawn, and you've been awake for— He paused, calculating. 23 hours? 26, actually. I had a class before my shift. His expression darkened. You work yourself to exhaustion, says the vampire king who needs a special drink to stay awake during rest hours. We are both fools then, but his voice was gentle. Come, I'll show you your room. The bedroom he led her to was smaller than the main living space, but still larger than her entire apartment, dominated by a bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. The linens were silk, the pillows numerous, and when Wren sank onto the mattress, she nearly moaned at the comfort. There are clothes in the wardrobe, Alaric said from the doorway. They should fit you reasonably well. I had Zavarin estimate sizes. Bathroom is through that door. If you need anything, I'll be in the next room. You don't sleep in a coffin? His lips quirked. That's a myth. We sleep in beds like anyone else, just very deeply and only during daylight hours. So you'll be, what, unconscious? While the sun's up? Essentially, all vampires are. It's our greatest vulnerability. He hesitated. Which is why I need you to understand that once dawn breaks, I cannot protect you. If there's a threat, if something happens, you'll be on your own until sunset. The trust implicit in that statement staggered her. He was making himself vulnerable, admitting weakness, trusting her with knowledge that could be used against him. I won't let anything happen, Wren said, to either of us. Alaric smiled, and it was soft, genuine, nothing like the regal masks he wore in public. Good night, Wren Grayson. Or good morning, I suppose. Good night, Alaric. She didn't ask his last name, and he didn't offer it. Some things apparently took time even when your entire world had just shifted on its axis. Wren woke to the dim light of late afternoon filtering through curtains that were so heavy they blocked out most of the sun. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was, reaching automatically for her phone to check the time, and found it fully charged, sitting on the nightstand with a note in elegant handwriting. Had Severin retrieve your charger from your apartment. Also collected some of your personal belongings. They're in the wardrobe. She should have been unsettled by vampires going through her things, but instead she felt absurdly touched. She showered in a bathroom that was all marble and gold fixtures, then investigated the wardrobe. Sure enough, someone had packed a selection of her clothes, her favorite jeans, comfortable shirts, even her toothbrush and skincare products. Mixed in were new items: a dress of deep green silk that looked expensive, soft leather boots, a jacket of black wool that fit perfectly when she tried it on. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, the light outside had faded to dusk, and she could hear movement in the suite's main room. She found Alaric standing by the window, bathed in the last rays of dying sunlight that came through a gap in the curtains. He stood perfectly still, letting the light touch his pale skin, and she saw pain flicker across his features. Doesn't that hurt? She asked softly. He turned, and his smile was melancholy. Yes. But I like to remind myself what it feels like. To remember that I was human once, when sunlight was something to be enjoyed rather than feared. Wren crossed to him, and before she could second-guess the impulse, she took his hand and pulled him away from the window, back into the shadows. You don't have to hurt yourself for memories, don't I? but he let her pull him toward the seating area. I am a king to beings who view humans as prey. I enforce laws that prevent my kind from following their nature. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten what it means to be either human or vampire, if I've become something in between that belongs nowhere. You belong here, Wren said firmly. Your people need you. Severin clearly respects you. And you've built a system that allows two species to coexist. That's not nothing, Alaric. He looked at her with such raw emotion that she felt it like a physical touch. You've been here less than a day. How can you see me so clearly already? Maybe because I'm not blinded by centuries of politics and power plays. I just see you. A person vampire, whatever, who's doing his best in an impossible situation. Who comes to a cafe every night not just for a drink, but for a moment of normalcy. Who protected me without hesitation and then trusted me enough to bring me into his world. She squeezed his hand. I see you, Alaric, and I think you're extraordinary. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her again, but instead, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that was somehow more intimate than anything else could have been. The council awaits, he said quietly. Are you ready to be seen by vampire nobility? Probably not, but let's do it anyway. The council met in a chamber that could only be described as a throne room, though Alaric seemed uncomfortable with the term. It was circular, with a raised dais at one end where an ornate chair sat his seat, clearly. Arranged in a semicircle before the dais were 7 smaller chairs, currently occupied by vampires who all turned to stare when Wren entered at Alaric's side. They were as beautiful as every vampire she'd seen so far, pale, white-haired, ageless. But these carried themselves with an authority that spoke of power and centuries of accumulated knowledge. The oldest looking among them, a woman with hair twisted into an elaborate crown of braids, leaned forward as Wren and Alaric approached. So this is the human who has caused such disruption, she said, her voice like cold honey. I am Cassandra, eldest of this council. Tell me, girl, do you understand what you've walked into? Wren felt Alaric stiffen beside her, but she squeezed his hand once and stepped forward. Not entirely, no. But I understand that Alaric offered me sanctuary after I was targeted by vampires who want to challenge his authority. I understand that I'm here under his protection. And I understand that you're concerned about a human learning about your world. Does that cover the basics? A male vampire to Cassandra's left actually laughed. She has spirit, at least. I am Lucian. Tell me. Wren Grayson, how did you come to meet our king? He came to my cafe at midnight every night for a week and ordered the strangest drink I've ever made. The pomegranate concoction? This from another council member, younger looking, with a curious expression. We've heard about this. You created it? He told me the ingredients. I just mixed them, precisely, perfectly, every night. Alaric's voice carried clearly through the chamber. The mixture must be exact to work properly, and Wren has not failed once. Cassandra studied Wren with eyes that held centuries of knowledge. Interesting. And what do you know of our kind, human? What has Alaric told you? That vampires need blood to survive. That sunlight is deadly to you. That you have laws and structure and history that most humans don't know exists. Wren kept her voice steady. And that there are factions within your society that think humans should be prey rather than neighbors. Seraphine and her ilk, Cassandra said with obvious distaste. They cling to the old ways when we were hunted and had to be monsters to survive. They don't understand that the world has changed, that adaptation is necessary for our continued existence. You support Alaric's approach then? I support survival. Alaric's methods have kept us safe and hidden for 300 years. That earns loyalty. Cassandra's gaze shifted to the king. However, bringing a human into our court spaces without proper clearance sets a dangerous precedent. Others will ask for the same privilege. We cannot become a tourist attraction for humans who want to glimpse the supernatural. Wren is not a tourist, Alaric said, and his voice carried an edge of danger. She is under my personal protection, and she has already proven herself by defending me against Seraphine's attack. She stays. As your guest? Your pet? Your... Cassandra paused delicately. Companion. The weight of the question hung in the air. Wren felt every vampire in the room watching her, waiting to see how she'd react to being discussed like property. As his friend, Wren said clearly, at minimum, anything beyond that is between Alaric and me, not subject to council approval. Silence. Then Lucian laughed again, louder this time. Oh, I like her, she has fire. Very well, human. You may stay under the following conditions. You will not reveal our existence to other humans. You will not leave court spaces without escort until the threat from Seraphine is neutralized, and you will submit to a binding oath that ensures your silence should you ever leave. A binding oath? Wren looked at Alaric for explanation. Magic, he said quietly. Old magic that prevents you from speaking about us to uninitiated humans. It's not painful, but it is permanent. So I could never tell anyone about you? Even after. She trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. Even after this ends, whatever this is. You could tell other vampires or humans who already know our world exists, but you couldn't casually reveal our secrets. It's a protection for both species. Wren considered this. It made sense, actually. If humans knew vampires were real, there would be panic, witch hunts, violence. The binding would protect Alaric and his people while still allowing her to live a relatively normal life when she returned to the human world. Okay, she said. I agree to the terms. Cassandra rose from her seat with fluid grace. Then approach, human. Let us bind you properly. The ritual was surprisingly simple. Cassandra spoke words in a language Wren didn't recognize, pressed cold fingers to her forehead, and she felt something settle into her chest like a weight she'd carry forever. Not painful, as Alaric had promised, but present, real. It is done, Cassandra said. You are bound to our silence, and we are bound to your protection. Welcome to the court of the Vampire King, Wren Grayson. Try not to die. After the council meeting, Alaric took Wren on a tour of the underground complex. It was vast, far larger than she'd imagined, with corridors stretching in every direction like a subterranean palace. He showed her the library walls of books, reaching toward vaulted ceilings, tomes in languages both living and dead. The training halls where vampire warriors practiced combat with weapons and without. The blood stores, which made her uncomfortable until he explained they were donations from willing humans who were paid generously and treated with respect. We're not monsters, he said as they walked. Not anymore. We adapted, learned to coexist. Most of my subjects have never killed a human. Most? The older generation remembers different times, and there are always exceptions, rogues like Seraphine who reject our laws. But the majority understand that the old ways lead only to destruction. They ended up in the library, in a section Alaric said was his personal collection. He pulled books at random, showing her pieces of history that most humans would never see, accounts of vampire society, dating back millennia, treaties and laws written in fading ink, even photographs from the early days of the medium showing vampires who looked like humans except for their distinctive pale skin and white hair. You've been alive through so much, Wren said, studying a photograph dated 1843 that showed Alaric looking exactly as he did now. How do you not go insane from the weight of all that time? Who says I haven't? But he was almost smiling. In truth, it's difficult. I've watched empires rise and fall, seen humanity evolve from medieval fiefdoms to space travel, lost everyone I knew as a human, watched them age and die while I remained unchanged. He set the photograph down carefully. Immortality sounds appealing until you live it. Then it becomes a burden you carry alone, because no one else can truly understand what it means to be untethered from time. You're not alone now, Wren said quietly. You have Severin, the council, your subjects. They're vampires. They understand immortality, but they don't remember humanity. Most of them were turned centuries ago, and human lives mean little to them now. He met her eyes. You're different. You remind me what it was like to be mortal, to have everything matter because time is limited. Is that why you came to the cafe, for a reminder? Initially, yes. I needed the drink to function during midnight hours, and I'd heard of a skilled barista who worked the graveyard shift. But then I met you, and you were, he searched for words, extraordinary. Tired and overworked, juggling too many responsibilities, but still kind, still present. You made my drink perfectly every night and never once treated me like a burden, even when I was clearly your strangest customer. You tipped me $100. You were my favorite customer. Alaric laughed, actually laughed, warm and genuine. Such mercenary motives. Hey, I have student loans. Don't judge my survival strategies. His laughter faded to something softer. What were you studying before all this? Biochemistry. I wanted to be a researcher, maybe work in pharmaceutical development. Help create medicines that actually work instead of just enriching drug companies. She shrugged. Idealistic maybe. But I figured if I had to spend my life working, it should be for something meaningful. That's not idealistic. That's admirable. Alaric's expression was intent. And you should continue your studies. We have resources here, the library, internet access, even connections to universities if you need them. I will not be the reason your dreams die. The casual offer of support, the assumption that her goals mattered and should be accommodated, made Wren's throat tight. You'd do that? Wren, you're under my protection. That means more than just keeping you physically safe. It means ensuring you can thrive, not merely survive. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with unexpected gentleness. I want you to be happy here, for however long you choose to stay. The words "for however long you choose to stay" carried weight and acknowledgement that this was temporary, that she had agency, that she could leave whenever she wished. But looking at him now, at the vulnerability in his ageless eyes, Wren couldn't imagine wanting to leave. "I should make your drink," she said, deflecting from emotions that were too big to examine. "It's past midnight." Surprise flickered across his features. "You don't have to. I want to. Besides, you need it to function during these hours, right? Can't have the Vampire King falling asleep during important royal business." He smiled. "Very well, the kitchens are this way." The court's kitchen was industrial-sized and meticulously organized, stocked with both human food and the various supplements vampires apparently needed. Wren found everything she required and set about making Alaric's drink while he watched, leaning against a counter with an expression of contentment that made him look younger, less burdened. "You enjoy this," he observed. "The ritual of making it. I like creating things, even if it's just a weird vampire espresso." She measured the pomegranate juice carefully. "There's something satisfying about precision, about combining elements in exactly the right way to achieve the desired result. It's like chemistry, but you can drink it, and is the result desired?" She looked up from the steaming mixture. "You tell me, does it work?" "Perfectly." He accepted the finished drink, sipped, and closed his eyes briefly in satisfaction. "Every time." They stood in comfortable silence while he drank, and Wren found herself studying him, the elegant line of his jaw, the way his white hair fell across his forehead, the terrible beauty of a creature who was simultaneously human and other. When he opened his eyes and caught her staring, heat climbed her neck. "Sorry, I'm being weird. You're being observant. I don't mind." He set down the empty cup. "Though I confess I've been equally guilty of staring." "You're captivating, Wren Grayson. Has anyone told you that?" "Not recently. Mostly people tell me I look exhausted. You look alive, vibrantly, beautifully alive." He moved closer and she could feel the cool presence of him, the power barely contained beneath civilized veneer. "It's intoxicating to someone like me, who exists in a state of perpetual half-death. Is that all I am to you, a reminder of being human?" "No." The word was fervent, almost harsh. "You're complicated. You're brilliant and brave and far too kind for your own good. You threw boiling water at a vampire to protect me. You're studying biochemistry while working graveyard shifts to pay for it. You make me laugh, and I haven't genuinely laughed in decades." He cupped her face gently. "You're not a reminder of anything. You're simply yourself, and that's more than enough." Wren's breath caught. "Alaric, I know this is complicated. I know I'm asking you to exist in a world that isn't your own, to risk yourself for someone who has already lived centuries and will live centuries more. I know it's unfair." His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "But I find myself unwilling to let you go. Is that terribly selfish of me?" "Probably," Wren whispered. "But I don't want you to let me go either." This time when he kissed her, it was slow and deep and full of promise. She wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer despite the chill of his body, and let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing since the night he first walked into her cafe. Desire, connection, the terrifying, exhilarating sense that her life had just changed irrevocably and she was choosing to embrace it rather than run. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Not in the court. Stay with me. In my chambers, in my life, for as long as you'll have me. I'm already here. I mean truly, not as a guest." He hesitated. "As someone I'm courting, if that's not too archaic a term." Wren laughed breathlessly. "It's very archaic, but I like it. Yes, Alaric, court me. Woo me with your vampire charm and your ancient library and your terrible midnight coffee orders." His smile was brilliant, transforming. "As you wish." The next weeks fell into a rhythm that was strange and wonderful in equal measure. Wren spent her days studying. Alaric had been true to his word, providing access to academic resources that made her online classes seem almost easy. She attended lectures via video while Alaric and the rest of the court slept, did her homework in the library surrounded by books that were older than most countries, and sometimes ventured into the underground complex's communal spaces to interact with vampires who were slowly becoming accustomed to her presence. Severin became an unexpected friend. The warrior vampire had appointed himself her unofficial bodyguard during daylight hours, and though he couldn't actually be conscious to protect her, he'd arranged for human guards court employees who knew about vampires and were sworn to secrecy to watch over her. He also, Wren discovered, had a wicked sense of humor and a love of action movies that transcended his ancient origins. "I don't understand why the hero doesn't simply kill the villain immediately," he complained one evening while they watched a blockbuster on the suite's massive television. "All this posturing and monologuing. If you have your enemy helpless, you end them." "Simple. It's called dramatic tension," Wren said. "Also, Maybe heroes don't kill helpless enemies because that would make them villains too? Practical considerations outweigh moral philosophy in combat situations. You're a warrior vampire, of course you think that. He grinned, showing fangs. I keep my king alive. That requires a certain ruthlessness. At night, when the sun set and Alaric woke, they spent hours together. He taught her about vampire history, showed her magical artifacts from civilizations long dead, told her stories of his mortal life in a small European village she'd never heard of. In return, she told him about the modern world technology and social media, memes and pop culture, all the strange evolution humanity had undergone while he watched from the shadows. They talked about everything and nothing. She learned that he'd been turned at 28 by a vampire who saw potential in a village healer's son, that he'd fought in wars she'd only read about, advised rulers whose names filled history books, witnessed the rise and fall of empires, that he'd become king not through conquest but through consensus. Vampires had chosen him to lead because he understood both human and vampire nature, could bridge the gap between species. I never wanted to be king, he admitted one night, while they sat on the balcony of his chambers, a hidden space that opened onto an underground cavern, lit with bioluminescent plants that cast everything in soft blue-green light. I wanted to heal people, to help them. But my sire had other plans, and vampire society needed leadership during turbulent times. So I adapted. Do you regret it? Some days, when the weight of 300 years of decisions crushes down on me, when I have to make choices that hurt people for the greater good, yes, I regret it. He looked at her. But then I meet someone like you and I remember why I do this. To protect humans like you would have been. To create a world where both our species can exist without constant fear and violence. That's a lonely burden to carry. It was. Until you. The words were simple, but the emotion behind them made her chest ache. She took his hand, had grown accustomed to the chill of his skin, now found it comforting rather than strange, and squeezed gently. You're not alone anymore, I'm here. For how long? The question was soft, almost afraid. You're mortal, Wren. Even if you stay, even if we... Your life is a heartbeat to me. A beautiful, precious heartbeat that will end while I continue. The reminder of her mortality hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Wren had thought about it, of course. Had lain awake during the day wondering what it meant to fall in love with someone who would outlive her by centuries. But she'd also realized something important. I'd rather have whatever time we get than waste it worrying about the end, she said. Maybe that's naive. Maybe it's human, but it's how I feel. I choose you, Alaric, for however long I have. His eyes blazed golden, the vampire nature showing through. And if I offered you more, if I asked you to become like me, to join me in immortality? Her heart stuttered. She'd known this conversation was coming, but hearing him actually say it made it real. Is that even possible? Yes. A vampire of sufficient age and power can turn a human. I am certainly old and powerful enough. He raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. But I will not ask it of you lightly. Becoming a vampire means giving up sunlight forever, means watching everyone you know age and die, means existing outside humanity. It's not a gift, Wren. It's a curse disguised as one. But you'd want me to? If I chose it? Selfishly, yes. The thought of losing you to time terrifies me in ways that 300 years of existence have not prepared me for. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. But I also want you to live, truly live, in whatever form brings you joy. If that means remaining human, growing old, having experiences I can never share, then I will love you through all of it and consider myself blessed for the time we had. Wren felt tears prick her eyes. That's possibly the most romantic and heartbreaking thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm 300 years old. I've had time to practice pretty speeches. She laughed wetly. Shut up and kiss me. He did, thorough and deep, and for a while, they didn't talk about mortality or eternity. They simply existed together in the moment, and that was enough. The peace shattered on a night 3 weeks after Wren had come to the court. She was in the library, studying for an exam, when Severin burst through the doors with his sword drawn and his expression grim. We're under attack. Seraphine has returned with reinforcements, at least 20 vampires. All hostile. Alaric is in the council chamber and cannot leave without abandoning the defensive wards. He grabbed her arm. We need to get you to the safe room now. What? I'm not hiding while everyone else fights. You're human. You'll die in seconds if you encounter hostile vampires. He pulled her into the corridor, moving fast enough that she had to run to keep up. Please, Wren. Alaric will never forgive me if you're hurt, and I will never forgive myself. Let me do my job. They raced through corridors that were suddenly filled with vampires moving with deadly purpose, warriors arming themselves, court members being evacuated. Everyone moving with the precision of a society that had planned for this. Severin led her down a staircase she'd never seen before, deeper underground, until they reached a door of solid metal covered in symbols that glowed faintly. Inside, there's water, food, medical supplies. The door is warded, nothing can break through it without a council member's blood. He pushed her gently but firmly through the door. Stay here until Alaric or I come for you. No matter what you hear, do not leave. Understand? Severin, promise me. She saw the fear in his ancient eyes and realized he wasn't just protecting her for Alaric's sake. Somehow in the past week she'd become important to him too. I promise, be careful. Always. He flashed a brief smile. I've survived worse than Seraphine's tantrums. The door sealed with a sound of finality, and Wren was alone in a room that was surprisingly comfortable, furnished like a small apartment, clearly designed for extended sieges. She pressed her ear to the door and heard nothing through the thick metal. Time crawled. She paced, tried to study, gave up and paced some more. Her phone had no signal this deep underground. She was cut off completely, with no way to know what was happening above. Then she heard it, faint but distinct, an explosion that shook dust from the ceiling. Shouting, the clash of combat. Wren's hands shook as she pressed against the door again. She'd promised to stay, had sworn she wouldn't leave, but every instinct screamed at her to do something, anything. Alaric was up there fighting. Severin was up there fighting. People who'd become important to her were risking themselves while she hid in safety. Another explosion, closer this time. More shouting, and then a scream, female, agonized, cut short. She couldn't just stand here. Wren looked around the safe room with new eyes, assessing. Severin had said the door was warded, that nothing could break through without council blood. But he'd also taught her, during their movie nights and casual conversations, that vampire wards were designed to keep threats out. They didn't necessarily prevent things from leaving. She approached the door and pushed carefully. It didn't budge. Tried the handle. Locked tight. But there was a keypad beside the door, a modern addition to ancient magic, probably a secondary security measure. Wren studied it, thinking. Alaric was 300 years old, had lived through countless eras, but she'd watched him input passwords into his computer. Had noticed that he favored numerical sequences that meant something to him. She tried his birth year, 1724. Nothing. The year he became king. Nothing. Then, on impulse, she tried a different number, the date they'd met, reversed. 11/19/26, entered as 261911. The keypad beeped and the lock clicked open. Wren whispered an apology to Severin for breaking her promise and slipped into the corridor beyond. The sounds of combat were louder now, echoing through the stone passages. She followed them up the stairs, her heart hammering, until she emerged into chaos. The underground complex had become a war zone. Vampires fought in clusters, Alaric's people recognizable by their coordinated movements and defensive positions, Seraphine's by their wild, aggressive attacks. Blood stained the floors. Bodies, vampire bodies, already crumbling to ash, littered the corridor. Wren pressed against the wall, trying to make herself small, and spotted Alaric in the midst of the largest cluster of fighters. He moved like death incarnate, every motion precise and devastating. But he was surrounded, outnumbered. Even as she watched, a vampire lunged at his back. She didn't think, didn't plan. She grabbed a fallen sword from the floor, heavier than she expected, but adrenaline gave her strength and ran forward, screaming to draw attention away from Alaric. It worked. The vampire turned toward her, red eyes widening in surprise, and Alaric used the distraction to strike. His claws tore through the vampire's chest, and the enemy crumbled to ash. "Wren," Alaric's voice was thunder. "What are you doing? Helping? You were supposed to stay in the safe room." "Yeah, well, I'm bad at following orders." She swung the sword at another approaching vampire, missed completely. But the attempt made them hesitate. Alaric's laugh was slightly manic. "You magnificent, infuriating woman, stay behind me." He moved to shield her, and together they fought their way through the corridor. Wren had no training, no skill, but she had determination and the element of surprise. The hostile vampires kept hesitating when they saw her, a human in the midst of vampire combat, and those moments of hesitation gave Alaric and the other court members openings. They were winning. Slowly, painfully, but Seraphine's forces were falling back, retreating. And then Seraphine herself appeared at the corridor's end, her beautiful face twisted with rage. "This is your great weakness," she screamed at Alaric. "A pathetic human that makes you vulnerable, makes your entire court vulnerable." "She makes me stronger," Alaric said, pulling Wren closer. "She reminds me what we're protecting, why our laws matter. You've forgotten, Seraphine. Forgotten that we were human once. That we survived because we adapted, not because we conquered. Adaptation is weakness. Predators don't adapt, they dominate." Seraphine's eyes blazed red. "I'll prove it by tearing out your little human's throat." She lunged with inhuman speed and Wren barely had time to raise the sword in defense. But she didn't need to. Alaric was there, intercepting Seraphine mid-leap with force that sent them both crashing into the wall. They grappled, moving too fast to track, and then Alaric had her pinned, his hand around her throat, claws pressing into her pale skin. "Yield," he commanded. "Yield now or I end this permanently." "You won't kill me," Seraphine hissed. "You're too civilized, too bound by your precious laws. My laws include execution for those who threaten the existence of our kind. You've broken the accords, attacked a sitting king, endangered the peace we've maintained for centuries." His voice was cold, absolute. "I will kill you, Seraphine, and it will be justice, not murder." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Seraphine's eyes went to Wren, standing behind Alaric with the sword still clutched in shaking hands. "She'll die," Seraphine said. "Even if you kill me now, she's mortal. She'll age and die and leave you alone again." Was she worth it, Alaric? Worth breaking tradition, worth exposing our world, worth all this death? Alaric didn't hesitate. Yes. Then his claws tightened and Seraphine crumbled to ash. Silence fell across the corridor. The remaining hostile vampires, seeing their leader destroyed, fled into the night. Alaric's court members began securing the complex, tending to wounded, clearing the dead. Alaric turned to Wren, his perfect face spattered with blood, his eyes blazing gold, and she should have been terrified. Instead, she dropped the sword and threw her arms around him. "Are you hurt?" He ran his hands over her frantically, checking for injuries. "Wren, answer me. I'm fine. I'm okay." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "Are you?" "I'll heal. But you were supposed to stay safe. How did you even get out of the safe room?" "I figured out the code. And before you yell at me, I couldn't just hide while you were fighting. I had to help. You could have died. One of them could have killed you in seconds. But they didn't. We won. And Alaric?" She cupped his face, feeling the coolness of his skin, the slight tremor that spoke of how close he'd come to losing control. "You're worth it too, all of this. Whatever comes next, you're worth it." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, tasting of blood and victory and relief. When they broke apart, he was smiling despite everything. "You're going to give me a second heart attack. You know that, right? In 300 years, no one has terrified me the way you do." "Good. Keeps things interesting." Severin approached, looking worse for wear but grinning. "She broke out of the safe room. I'm both impressed and horrified." "She hacked the code," Alaric said, something like pride in his voice. "Clever girl. Terrible soldier, but clever." Severin's expression sobered. "We lost 5 of our own. 32 hostiles destroyed. Seraphine's faction is broken. This won't happen again. Make sure of it. Increase the wards, station guards at all entry points," and Alaric paused. "Offer amnesty to any of Seraphine's followers who surrender willingly. This ends tonight. No more blood feuds, no more civil war, as you command." After Severin left to coordinate the aftermath, Alaric led Wren back to his chambers. She was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of what had happened crashing down on her. She'd been in a vampire war, had seen people die, had nearly died herself. Alaric drew her a bath, helped her out of blood-spattered clothes with gentle hands, and sat beside the tub while she soaked in water hot enough to turn her skin pink. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I brought you into danger, put you at risk. I should have sent you away the moment Seraphine appeared. Should have stopped." Wren reached out, taking his hand. "I chose this, chose you. I knew there would be risks, that your world is dangerous. I came anyway because being with you matters more than being completely safe. You shouldn't have to make that choice. Everyone makes that choice. Every time we leave the house, drive a car, trust another person, we're choosing to risk ourselves for the chance at something meaningful. This isn't different. It's just more dramatic." He laughed softly. "You have a gift for perspective. I have a gift for stubbornness. There's a difference." After her bath, they lay together in his massive bed the first time they'd shared it. Alaric held her carefully, as if afraid she might break, and Wren pressed close to his cool body. "I've been thinking," she said into the darkness, "about what you asked, about immortality." She felt him go still. "And I'm not ready yet. I'm only 24. There's still so much I want to do as a human, finish my degree, maybe see my family one more time, have a few more years of daylight." She turned to face him. "But someday when I've lived enough mortal life to feel complete, when the only thing left that I want is more time with you, ask me again. And you'll say yes?" "I think so, maybe, probably." She smiled. "I'm not afraid of eternity if I'm spending it with you. But I need to choose it consciously, not as an escape or a desperate attempt to keep what we have. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." He kissed her forehead. "I will wait, however long it takes, and if you change your mind, if you decide mortality is what you want, I'll love you through all of it, and consider myself blessed for the time we had." "You're really good at romantic speeches for a 300-year-old king." I've had excellent motivation recently. They fell asleep tangled together, human and vampire, mortal and immortal, and Wren dreamed of futures that stretched far beyond her limited lifespan. The months that followed were healing for the court and revelatory for Wren. With Seraphine's faction destroyed, peace settled over the vampire community. Alaric worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, to shore up the systems that kept vampires hidden from human knowledge, to ensure that the violence wouldn't repeat. Wren continued her studies and discovered that she loved the challenge of balancing academics with her strange new life. She graduated with her degree in biochemistry at the top of her class, accepted into a graduate program that would let her continue living in the city, continue living with Alaric. Her family thought she had a wealthy boyfriend who preferred privacy. Not entirely untrue, she made friends among the court vampires, learned to move through their world with confidence instead of fear, learned their customs, their history, their complicated relationships with the human world, became in a sense a bridge between species human enough to understand mortal perspectives, integrated enough into vampire society to command respect. And through it all, Alaric was there, patient, devoted, endlessly fascinated by her. They spent their nights together talking, laughing, making love with a passion that transcended the difference in their body temperatures. He supported her research, her goals, her need to maintain her humanity even while living in his world. On the year anniversary of the night they met, Alaric took her back to the cafe where it had all started. It was late, well past midnight, and the current night shift barista looked confused when they walked in. "Does this place still have pomegranate juice?" Alaric asked. Yeah? Excellent. My companion will make me a drink. Very specific instructions. I trust you don't mind?" The barista, a college student who clearly had no idea what to make of them, shrugged. "Sure, whatever. Knock yourself out." Wren moved behind the counter like she'd never left, gathering ingredients that she'd long since memorized. The espresso machine was newer, the layout slightly different, but muscle memory took over. She made Alaric's drink exactly as she had a year ago, crowned it with a flake of silver leaf, and presented it with a smile. "Your ridiculous vampire coffee, sir." He took it, sipped, and his eyes closed in satisfaction. "Perfect. As always. You don't actually need this anymore," Wren said. "You told me the exhaustion during midnight hours faded months ago." "True, but I still enjoy it. Enjoy the ritual. Enjoy watching you make it." He set the cup down and took her hands. "This is where I met you, where my life changed irrevocably for the better. I wanted to commemorate that by ordering a weird drink at midnight, by asking you something important." He reached into his coat and produced a small box, opened it to reveal a ring that made her breath catch. It was antique, the band worked in intricate patterns, the stone a ruby that glowed like captured blood. "This ring has been in my family for 400 years. It's been worn by humans and vampires, by people who chose love despite impossible circumstances. I would like you to wear it, Wren Grayson. Not as a symbol of ownership or binding, but as a promise that I will love you through whatever you choose, mortality or eternity, human or vampire. Will you marry me?" Wren looked at the ring, at Alaric's hopeful face, at the life they'd built together in the spaces between human and vampire worlds. Thought about the future stretching before them, her remaining mortal years, the possibility of transformation, the eternity they might share. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, warm against her skin despite its ancient origins. Then he kissed her while the confused barista watched, and the city lights blazed outside and the world continued spinning. They were married 3 months later in a ceremony that was part human tradition, part vampire ritual. Wren's family attended, charmed by Alaric despite his obvious strangeness, accepting the explanation that he had a rare medical condition that made him sensitive to sunlight. The vampire court attended in full regalia, and for one night 2 species celebrated together without fear or violence. Cassandra, the eldest council member, officiated. She spoke of unity and balance, of love that transcended the boundaries of mortality, of the courage it took to build bridges between worlds. When Alaric and Wren exchanged vows, his in ancient languages she didn't understand, hers in plain English that came from the heart, there wasn't a dry eye among the assembled vampires. "I promise to love you," Wren said, holding Alaric's cool hands in hers, "through all my human years and whatever comes after. To stand beside you, to make you ridiculous drinks at midnight, to remind you what it means to be alive even when you're technically undead. To be your partner, your friend, your conscience when you need one. For as long as I exist in whatever form I exist." Alaric's vows were longer, flowered with the language of courtly love, but they boiled down to the same promise. Devotion without reservation, support without condition, love that would outlast time itself. When Cassandra pronounced them married, the celebration that followed was legendary. Music that ranged from centuries-old ballads to modern dance hits, food that accommodated both human and vampire guests, toasts that went on for hours as vampire after vampire stood to honor their king and his brave human bride. Severin's toast was the one that made Wren cry. I have known Alaric for 200 years, fought beside him, advised him, watched him carry the weight of leadership with grace and strength. But I have never seen him truly happy until Wren crashed into his life like a force of nature, armed with boiling water and perfect pomegranate espresso. She has given our king something we could never provide, a reason to remember joy. For that alone, she has earned my eternal loyalty. But she's also clever, kind, brave enough to tell vampires when they're being idiots, and she appreciates good action movies. So really, Alaric married up. Try not to mess it up, my king. Alaric had laughed and pulled both Wren and Severin into an embrace that was affectionate and slightly undignified for a vampire monarch. Years passed. Wren completed her graduate degree, began working for a pharmaceutical research company that was secretly vampire-owned, developing medicines that benefited both species. She published papers under a pseudonym, made discoveries that would have won awards if she could have claimed them publicly. She watched her parents age, visited them regularly, made peace with the fact that she would outlive them. They died within months of each other when she was 32, and Alaric held her through the grief, understanding it in ways that only someone who'd lost everyone they'd loved as a mortal could. At 35, Wren looked in the mirror and saw the first fine lines around her eyes, the first strands of gray in her hair. She'd lived a full human life, loved, learned, achieved things she was proud of, and she realized that she was ready. Ask me again, she said to Alaric one night as they lay in their bed. He knew immediately what she meant. Are you certain? I've lived, I've done what I wanted as a human. I've said goodbye to everyone who needed human me. Now I want eternity, with you. If the offer still stands, it will always stand. He sat up, pulling her with him, his expression solemn. But you need to understand what you're choosing. You'll never see sunlight again. Never taste human food the same way. Never grow old naturally. You'll watch humanity evolve and change while you remain frozen. It's not romantic, Wren. It's sacrifice. I know, but I'm choosing it anyway, because everything I want now is already here, in this underground palace with you and Severin and the family we've built. I'm not losing anything I still need. I'm gaining time. Time with you, that's worth any sacrifice. Alaric studied her face in the dim light. Then slowly he nodded. Very well, but we do this properly. With the council present, with rituals that ensure the transformation is clean and complete. I will not risk losing you to a botched turning. The transformation was scheduled for the new moon 3 weeks later. The council prepared the ritual chamber, a space deep underground that Wren had never seen, carved with symbols that predated written language. She spent the intervening weeks saying private goodbyes to sunlight, to coffee that tasted like coffee rather than ash, to the warm vitality of human life. On the night of the new moon, she descended into the ritual chamber dressed in white, Alaric beside her in formal black. The council waited in a circle, Severin at Alaric's right hand, all of them solemn. Cassandra spoke the ancient words, explained the process. Alaric would drain her blood until she was on the edge of death, then feed her his blood infused with the transformative magic that made vampires. The process would take hours, would be agonizing, and there was a small chance she wouldn't survive. Do you accept these risks? Cassandra asked. I do. Do you choose this transformation freely, without coercion or undue influence? I do. Then let it begin. Alaric's bite was painless at first. He'd learned over their years together exactly how to make it pleasurable rather than terrifying. But as he drank deeper, as her blood drained away, the pleasure faded to weakness and then to pain. She felt her heart stuttering, her vision darkening, her body shutting down. Then his wrist was at her lips, blood flowing into her mouth, and she drank because dying wasn't an option. The blood tasted like everything she'd been and everything she would become: human memories and vampire power, love and transformation, death and rebirth. The pain intensified until she was screaming, her body rewriting itself on a cellular level. Bones strengthening, senses sharpening, her heart slowing to near stillness. She felt death claim her and let it, trusting that Alaric wouldn't let her slip away completely. Then slowly she came back, different, changed. Wren opened her eyes and the world was different. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer, scents overwhelming in their complexity. She could hear heartbeats, the human guards stationed outside the chamber, their pulses quick and fragile, could smell blood and magic and age, could feel power humming beneath her skin. Wren? Alaric's voice, cautious and hopeful. Can you hear me? She turned to face him, her husband, her maker, her choice, and smiled to show fangs that were new and sharp and terrifying. I can hear everything, she whispered. It's incredible. His laugh was pure joy. He pulled her into his arms and she clung to him, adjusting to her new strength, her new senses, the fundamental change in what she was. Welcome to immortality, Cassandra said, and there was approval in her ancient voice. Welcome to your eternity, Wren of the House of Alaric. Learning to be a vampire was both harder and easier than Wren had imagined. The bloodlust was manageable. She'd expected worse based on Alaric's warnings, but perhaps their bond made it easier, or perhaps she was simply fortunate. She learned to feed from willing donors, to control her strength, to move with the supernatural grace that all vampires possessed. She mourned the sunlight in quiet moments, standing at the edge of spaces where dawn light filtered in, and remembering warmth on her skin. But she didn't regret her choice. Not when she had centuries stretching before her. Not when Alaric looked at her with wonder and devotion. Not when she realized that she could continue her research indefinitely, could make discoveries that required lifetimes of study. Severin taught her to fight proper combat training, not the desperate flailing of that first attack. She discovered she had a talent for strategy, for seeing patterns in chaos, and eventually became one of Alaric's advisors. 20 years after her transformation, Cassandra retired from the council and recommended Wren for her seat. The vote was unanimous. 50 years after, Wren had become a legend in vampire society, the human who defended the king, who'd chosen transformation out of love rather than desperation, who'd bridged the gap between species with grace and intelligence. Young vampires sought her guidance, and humans who learned about their world asked to meet her. 100 years after that first midnight meeting in a cafe, Wren and Alaric stood on the balcony of their chambers, watching the underground garden's bioluminescent plants pulse with soft light. Do you regret it? Alaric asked quietly. The sacrifice? Wren thought about sunlight and mortality, about the human life she'd left behind. Then she thought about everything she'd gained: time with the man she loved, discoveries that had advanced medicine for both species, friendships that had lasted decades, a purpose that fulfilled her. Not for a second, she said. This is exactly where I want to be. He pulled her close and they stood together in the darkness, immortal and content. Years continued to pass, decades and then centuries. Technology evolved, humanity changed, but vampires remained as they'd always been: hidden, patient, eternal. Alaric ruled with Wren at his side, and together they guided their people through modernization while maintaining the traditions that kept them safe. They returned to the cafe. Sometimes it changed ownership multiple times, became a chain briefly, then closed and reopened as an independent shop. But they always remembered it as the place where everything began. On the 300th anniversary of the night, they met Wren, now as ancient and powerful as Alaric had been. When they first encountered each other, he made her the drink. She'd taught him the recipe decades ago, and he'd perfected it, though he claimed hers was still better. To us, he said, raising his cup in toast. To the overworked barista who made me remember what it meant to be alive. To the vampire king who ordered the strangest drink in existence and changed my life, Wren countered. They drank together in the chambers they'd shared for 300 years, and the love between them was as strong as ever, tested by time, proven by sacrifice, sustained by choice. This was their eternity. Hard-won, carefully maintained, absolutely worth it. And every midnight, without fail, they made that strange drink together: pomegranate juice and espresso, charcoal and spices crowned with silver leaf, a reminder of where they'd begun, a celebration of where they'd arrived, a promise of all the time still stretching before them. In the end, it wasn't the immortality that mattered. It was the choice to spend it together, building something that transcended the boundaries between human and vampire, mortal and eternal, ordinary and extraordinary. It was love. Simple and complicated, dangerous and safe, finite and infinite, all at once. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.